Let's do this. Okay.
Our next recipe?
Next recipe, yes.
All right, we've got a millet porridge with chicken and apple. Jeremy is our absolute expert in terms of blending meats. That can be really scary to think about. You can be really, a lot of folks tell me they're really uncertain. He is going to give us all the tips and tricks on, what meats are best, how to have the most success with blending meats. This is a great recipe as well because it has good quality protein, fiber, like I was mentioning before. Take us away, Jeremy.
All right. So, yes, when blending meats, or if you're looking to choose an animal-based protein to blend, try to choose proteins that don't have a lot of sinew, a lot of tendon. That can be a little challenging to blend down properly. You can strain it out, but it does make it a little more difficult. So leaner cuts are usually a little better, but leaner cuts also tend to dry out a little bit quicker too. So leaner cuts paired with a sort of a cooking method that has liquid in it. So braising, stewing, pressure cookers. If you have one, is going to be probably your best tool in that case, just in terms of efficiency, speed, but it gets the protein very, very soft. Makes it a lot easier to
So you're cooking it in water or in a sauce, basically.
Yes.
Not necessarily frying or roasting.
Exactly.
No barbecue.
Exactly. Well, only because, again, back to my first point, is that caramelization, that charring, that caramelization is going to be very challenging to break down. It also tends to toughen the meat protein, whereas braising, and what I mean by braising is not so much liquid like in a soup or a stew, but just enough liquid so you can go halfway up your protein, covered, and then on a stovetop in the oven, slow and low, will soften the meat beautifully. Mm-hmm. Pressure cooker, again, you're using liquid with pressure. It's going to speed things up, soften things. Or in our case, we're going to make sort of a porridge, and we're going to just slowly cook it. So chicken breast works really well.
So that's why you mentioned less sinew is better, so that's why you would maybe pick a chicken breast over a chicken thigh or a chicken leg.
Exactly. Yeah, and they work. The chicken thighs work too, and you're getting a little more fat there. But sometimes, if you don't clean it properly, you might have some parts that are a little bit more challenging to puree. I just find that the chicken breast, from my experience, it does puree pretty well. I know that from some of my students at college, George Brown College, from where they're from, it's common to have chicken breast smoothies as like a protein shake, which was new to me.
Cooked chicken breast.
Oh yes, yeah. Actually, yeah. Cooked chicken breast smoothies, but it's sort of it was common from what they were telling me. So great protein, and it just works really well for what the texture that we're trying to achieve at the end.
Are there any other proteins animal proteins that you would recommend for this recipe specifically?
You can do this with fish. Fish purees really, really well. It's a great way to add some extra protein. It doesn't take as long to cook.
Like a whitefish?
Yeah, whitefish would, again, just remove the skin, but as long as, and make sure the bones are removed as well.
Would a canned fish work? It's cooked already.
Yeah. If you're going most common, tuna. I have not tried it with tuna. I don't know if it will soften as nicely.
Maybe so, like a raw fish.
Like a sole or like a piece of haddock or something like that. Mm-hmm. But you've given me another challenge, so we'll get back to on canned fish. We'll try to make it work. All right, so chicken breast is what we're using today. We're going to season it up. We're going to add a little bit of oyster sauce. Or sorry, not oyster sauce, hoisin sauce. You can use oyster sauce if you want. This is really, this is just the flavor profile that I'm going for. You can season it with whatever you like. If you have a favorite marinade.
I do often recommend hoisin sauce and sesame oil because they're strong flavors without being spicy. And spices can be really challenging. Many people during and after treatment for head and neck cancers have ultra sensitive mouths.
Yes, yeah, and we're using sesame oil like you mentioned. This is a roasted sesame oil, so it has like a really nice sort of toasty,
cozy,
flavor to it, aroma to it. If you don't like something as aromatic, you can definitely use even like a grapeseed oil or an avocado oil would be like your neutral, or like an olive oil, you would get something as well. If you want a super neutral, avocado oil, grapeseed oil would be a good choice. Okay, so, and again, whatever you like in terms of flavors, go ahead and add it. We're going to mix this through.
I like these oils and sauces because, well, first of all, they're adding moisture, right? So we're already getting some of that moisture in with the meat. And then it's also adding, I'm thinking in my brain, in my dietitian brain, calories and protein. Well, no, maybe not protein, just calories.
Yeah. Yeah, but with the chicken breast, you got protein.
There's the protein.
All right, so you can mix this in advance. You can put it in the fridge. You can marinate it a few hours. You can do it the day before if you have the time. But it's going to sort of slowly cook in this sort of porridge, so it's not completely necessary. But the star of the show, which I think is our millet. Who's tried millet before? Okay, we have two people. You've probably mostly seen it as bird food, which is how I grew up knowing millet. But it is not just for the birds.
It's an ancient grain,
It is an
Jeremy.
ancient grain, yes.
It's a whole, even better than an ancient grain, it's a whole grain, which means that it is the full, that we haven't removed any of the husk, so we're getting all of that fiber, all of those vitamins, minerals, and it's also a source of protein as well, millet. So it is very nutritious. It can be very difficult to get whole grains in blended foods, so this is a great option. Jeremy tells me that it blends very well, and it's not quite as starchy as some of the other grains like oats or rice or, can be, or barley can be when blending. It's also gluten-free, so if you do have gluten sensitivities or intolerances, millet could be a really good option.
Yes, yeah. It is pretty quick cooking grain. You can definitely substitute this with like cracked rice as well. So what we're doing is we're creating a millet porridge. It's going to be very similar. If you're familiar with congee, it's going to be similar. It's going to be sort of that realm of consistency. If you are using rice instead, just rinse it really, really well, especially for the texture that we're trying to achieve. We don't want a lot of the excess starch. Okay. With the millet, I just did a quick rinse through. If you're using rice, you want to sort of call it like polishing the rice, so until the water sort of turns clear.
So rinsing the rice really well in the water. Yeah,
exactly. Millet, we're going to go ahead and just add it directly to our pot. 3/4 of a cup for this portion. Okay, and the pot is on, so it's going to sort of just lightly toast it up a bit, and then I'm going to go ahead and add my bone broth or stock or whatever you like.
Did you make this bone broth, Jeremy?
I did make this bone broth, Carole-Anne, yes. So this is like a chicken-based bone broth.
So it can be pretty tricky knowing, because it's made with the same ingredients, a chicken broth and a bone broth, how do we know if we're making bone broth or if we're just making regular chicken stock?
Good question. So obviously the bones are really, really important. You do want to cook them to the point, the more the better, so that we can extract as much as possible out of the bones, especially that sort of marrow and that sort of gelatin.
Because that's where the protein comes from, right? It's the marrow in the bones.
Yeah, and you're just gonna get a lot more flavor that way too. So cooking it until the bones are, you can test it, like they should be soft enough for it just with your hands. You can break them apart. Again, pressure cooker is your best friend for bone broths. That's going to be the quickest, easiest way to make a bone broth. Otherwise, you can just cook it in a pot for, like you're looking at, for chicken bones, maybe like 6 to 8 hours, and then longer for beef bones.
Mm-hmm.
To make a stock from bones, you don't have to cook that long, but to get the most out of it, we want to make sure that we cook them to the point where, again, the bones are really nice and soft, okay? Mm-hmm. So it is a longer process. If you have a pressure cooker, it could take like a couple hours, and not 2 hours. It doesn't take as long, so it'll be quicker.
So it sounds like it's going to be, if you're making a bone broth at home, you need to make sure you have a good amount of bones. It's going to be simmering for a while if it's on your pot, so up to like 8 to 10 hours we're talking, and you know that you've extracted some of that protein if you're, if you feel like the bones are rubbery. I will say I've never made a bone broth because I've never had rubbery bones in my pot.
Yes, right. Yeah, so, and then another thing too, we're saying, like, if you want to make this soup from scratch, you don't have to make a 10-hour bone broth. These are just extra suggestions to upright the
It's just
calories
to
and
up the calories, up the
and get them
protein.
so-
Like I said,
Yeah.
if you're interested in bone broth, it's available at the store in cartons, in liquid form, or in powdered form. And you can get you can get the protein, you can get the extra calories from that way as well.
Yeah. So you can just make this with any regular stock if you wanted to as well. I'm going to zoom you in to what we have going on. Okay, so I have my millets in there with my stock. Once it comes up to a boil, which is almost there, I'm going to add my apples. So 1 apple worth, peeled and cored. Again, we don't want the skins, we don't want the seeds in there. The apples are going to give it a really nice texture. Similar to the carrots, once they're cooked nice and soft, if you were to puree them, you're going to get this really sort of silky, smooth consistency, which is what we
They
want.
look peeled too, eh? Those apples?
Yes, yeah. So peeled and cored. And then you can go ahead and add the chicken directly in with all of the marinade in there.
It is kind of a one pot meal.
Yeah.
But I would say, even though we call it a porridge, I feel like it's, especially since it's savory, I feel like it's almost like a stew. It could also be kind of a stew. It's just because the grains are in there, the millet's already in there, that gives it kind of more of that porridge name, but very similar to a stew or soup.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's it. So it's just those 3 ingredients mainly with the broth. Once it comes up to a boil, lid on top. We're going to close it and reduce it to low and simmer. Give it a stir every once in a while so that the millet does not stick to the bottom, because it will tend to do that. And as it cooks, it'll start to thicken over time. Okay, so we're looking for about 30 minutes, 40 minutes until the chicken is really nice and soft. And we can do that same sort of fork test. With the apple, with the chicken, with very little pressure, you should be able to just easily squish everything. And then the millet will also break down quite a bit.
Are we going to do some plating?
Let's do some plating.
I want you to do the trick with the chicken, Jeremy, where you do it with the fork test.
Oh, fork test. Okay. Lost my other ladle. Let's use this one.
Because I think that really goes into when you're blending foods, like so much of whether you know it's going to blend well comes before you put it in the blender, right? Like, so these fork tests are, is everything cooked soft enough? You're probably going to be cooking things longer than you would if you were not going to blend it, right? If you were going to be cooking to eat it with solid foods, you're going to want to cook it past that until it's very soft, very fork tender to get a successful blend.
Okay, so I don't know if you can see that consistency. It's very, very, very soft. And then with the chicken, again, by cooking it with the lid on low, let's see, so this is a bigger piece here.
Our camera is on the stove now.
All right, so you can see, actually,
Maybe on the cutting board.
yeah, I'm gonna do it right on the cutting board, okay? And then with very little pressure, you should just easily be able to shred it. And again, this is chicken breast, which can tend to be tough. Because it's like slowly cooking in that liquid, it should be able to shred apart really, really easily. Okay, that is what.
This could be something if, let's say, you're able to tolerate more of a minced texture, which means, in very small pieces, maybe that would be something more appropriate for you. You can use the same recipe at different levels throughout your recovery, throughout that swallow rehab.
I have a question, Jeremy, about the temperature. You may have mentioned this already. Are you cooking this on low to medium? Because I know with chicken breast it can get really tough.
Exactly.
If it's going for 30 minutes.
You got it. Yeah.
So
So once it comes up to a boil, right before you put the lid on, reduce it to low. Go low and then lid on and then just slow cook the rest of the way. Yeah, just until it's nice and soft.
Probably a good slow cooker recipe.
You can definitely use a slow cooker. If anyone hasn't thrown out their slow cookers yet, I still have
Instant
one.
Pot. Instant Pot has it
Has
all.
it been replaced by the
The Instant Pot has a slow cooker function.
Instant Pot and air fryers are replacing all of
I hit a tender spot.
No, not tender. It comes up in a lot of our classes, and I love that our patients are using air fryers. I just have to educate myself a little bit more on how to use it because I'm not as versed. Okay, so we're serving it as more of like that porridgey consistency, but the same process. If we want to blend it to that stage, we're going to blend and add more of that broth. Okay, so that broth, that extra broth is going to be key. I don't want to dilute it. So it's very easy to like use this, add water, you're diluting the flavor, you're also diluting the nutrition, right? By adding some broth, or if you wanted to up the protein, maybe we can use like a nutritional supplement, maybe like a soy milk, something like
Absolutely.
that, right?
Milk, soy milk, the broth you were mentioning. If it needs to stay a specific consistency, maybe you can consider thickening a broth so that it's the right consistency and then using that to dilute. Not to dilute, to thin,
Yeah.
not really thin, to help with the blending.
Mhm.
Because when you blend a food, you need to add that liquid to get the right consistency, but then by adding all that liquid, it does dilute some of the nutrients, which is sometimes why when you're blending foods, you feel like you need to eat more and you feel like you're eating so much, but the concentration of the nutrients has gone down a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And with this as well, because we have the chicken, we have the grains, definitely passing it through a sieve to sort of puree any
After
of
you
those
blend
pieces.
it.
After you blend it.
To get out any pieces that are still left.
You got it. We're going to top it with a little bit of extra toasted sesame oil on top. And let's see, do our best to show the highlight there. We have this really, really nice sort of millet porridge.
And see, it's not gloopy, right? So
No.
like sometimes when you cook in a soup, the rice can get gloopy. Barley would be getting really gloopy right now. That would be hard to blend. But the millet is a really good grain, a really good whole grain to use in this recipe.
Yes.